The trading station at its edge hung in the darkness between stars, a massive wheel of metal and commerce where 1,000 species conducted business far from the prying eyes of their home governments. Stood at the observation deck, watching ships drift through the docking bays like mechanical fish in an aquarium. He wore simple civilian clothes, a gray jacket over black pants, nothing that would mark him as military. His dog tags sat in a locker back on Earth, 23 light-years away. The station thrummed with alien life. Tall merchants with their crystalline skin negotiated with squat traders. Flying drifted through the upper levels while heavy-set laborers hauled cargo containers through the lower decks. Humans were still relatively new to this cosmic neighborhood, having joined the Galactic Commerce Collective only 15 years ago. Most aliens still saw them as curiosities, weak creatures from a backwater world with nothing special to offer. Checked his chronometer. The meeting would start in 20 minutes. He had been sent here by people who officially did not exist, to acquire information that officially was not for sale, from a contact who officially had never been seen. Just another Tuesday. Human, a clicking voice spoke behind him, turned slowly, keeping his hands visible and relaxed. Stood there, features glinting under the station's artificial lighting. The species was known for their mercenary work and complete lack of loyalty to anyone but the highest bidder. This one wore battle armor from years of combat. "You are the one called." "Depends who's asking," replied, his tone friendly but non-committal. The mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Direct, I appreciate this. My employer wishes to speak with you. Come." It turned without waiting for confirmation, clearly expecting to follow. Considered his options for precisely 2 seconds before following. The information network he had spent 3 months building suggested this contact was legitimate. Besides, he was armed, though none of the weapons showed through his civilian clothes. Old habits died hard, even when you were supposed to be a simple trade negotiator. They moved through the station's commercial sector, passing shops that sold everything from dream wine to probability generators. They led him to a private meeting room, the kind that cost 50 credits an hour and came with full privacy screening. Inside, sat at the central table, its slug-like body supported by an advanced mobility platform, were information brokers, living computers who remembered everything they ever experienced with perfect clarity. This translator converted its chemical signals into standard galactic. "Thank you for coming. We have much to discuss." Took a seat across the table, noting the exits and the placement of security cameras, all inactive, according to the red lights. "I was told you have information about the Syndicate's operations in the outer reaches." "I do," agreed. "But first I have questions. You are human, yes, from the planet Earth." "Last time I checked," said with a slight smile. "Fascinating species, humans," continued. "Your people have been part of the collective for only 15 standard cycles, yet you have already established significant trading relationships. Tell me, mister, what did you do before you became a trade negotiator?" The question seemed innocent, but recognized the probe for what it was. "I worked in logistics, moving things from one place to another, making sure they got there safely." "Interesting," they said, "because my research suggests that humans have a military organization called the Navy SEALs. Elite warriors, trained in what you call special operations. They also specialize in moving things and ensuring they arrive safely, though those things are often their own forces moving into hostile territory." Kept his expression neutral. "I've heard of them. What does that have to do with our business transaction?" Before could respond, alarms shrieked through the station. Red emergency lights flashed, and an automated voice announced in multiple languages. "Security breach. All civilians proceed to nearest safe zones. This is not a drill." The mercenary immediately drew its plasma rifle, moving to cover the door. Its mobility platform rotated toward the exit, appendages twitching nervously. Stood slowly, his hands moving to positions that looked casual but put them close to his concealed weapons. "What's happening?" asked. "The Syndicate," said, its chemical signals coming faster now, almost panicked. "They must have learned about our meeting. They cannot allow this information to reach human authorities." The door exploded inward. 3 armored figures burst through, shocked troops by the look of their equipment. Were 7 feet of muscle and aggression, their species having evolved as apex predators on a high-gravity death world. They were often employed as enforcers and leg breakers throughout the galaxy. The mercenary managed to fire twice before a plasma bolt caught its center mass, dropping it instantly. The lead pointed a massive combat rifle at. "The human comes with us. You die either way, information broker." Moved, not with the panicked scramble of a civilian caught in violence, but with the precise economy of motion that came from years of training and combat experience. His hand swept his jacket aside, drawing the compact plasma pistol concealed there. 2 shots, both hitting the lead's exposed neck joint where the armor was weakest. The alien went down choking on its own blood. The second turned toward him but was already moving, diving behind his mobility platform. Return fire scorched the air where he had been standing. He came up firing, 3 quick shots that caught the second attacker in the face plate. Alien blood sprayed across expensive furniture. The third grabbed, using the as a shield. "Drop your weapon, human, or the broker dies." Kept his pistol trained on his hand rock steady. "You're going to kill him anyway. That's what Syndicate does to loose ends." "True," he admitted, "but his death can be quick or very, very slow, your choice." The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats. Then did something they did not expect. He smiled. Not a friendly smile, but something cold and predatory that suddenly made his human features look dangerous. "You know what you've done wrong here." "What?" the demanded, confused. "You assumed I was just another soft human, scared of a little violence." His voice dropped, taking on a different quality, harder and absolutely certain. "Let me educate you about Earth. My planet is 90% water. It's where humans learned to swim before we could walk properly. We became the deadliest predators in our oceans, then on our land, then in our skis. We invented war as an art form and have been perfecting it for 10,000 years." The grip on tightened, big words from a dead human. "Not finished," continued, taking one casual step forward. This rifle tracked him but didn't seem concerned. "The oceans taught us something important. They taught us that there are always bigger threats in the dark water. Things that hunt by instinct and perfect timing. We called them sharks and orcas and crocodiles, and we learned from them. We became them." Another step forward. This confidence wavered slightly. There was something wrong about the way this human moved, about the absolute certainty in his voice. "On Earth, we created warriors specifically trained for water operations. Insertion from the sea, silent and invisible. We called them SEALs after one of our ocean predators. They are tested beyond anything your species would consider rational. They are drowned and revived during training. They are frozen and starved and pushed past every breaking point. And the ones who survive become something more than human. They become weapons." "You are one of these SEALs," said quietly, understanding flooding through its consciousness. Nodded slightly, never taking his eyes off the 23 missions across 4 continents on Earth, 8 off-world operations since humanity joined the collective. I've killed in every environment you can imagine. Water, land, air, vacuum. I am exceptionally good at my job." There was backing up now, dragging with him. "You are outnumbered. Station security is compromised. More of my team are coming." "I know," said. "I've been counting. Your backup is 40 seconds away based on their footfall pattern echoing through the station's ventilation system. Heavy combat boots, probably 4 more. That gives me 38 seconds to finish this conversation." He moved suddenly, faster than the could track. His pistol barked once, the shot threading past his body to catch this hand. The alien roared and released its hostage. Was already there, inside the creature's reach, his combat knife appearing in his offhand. He drove it up under this jaw into its brain. The alien dropped like a puppet with cut strings. "Can you move?" asked, helping this platform right itself. "Yes, but where? The station is compromised." "My ship, Bay 17. You give me that information, I get you out of here alive." Appendages quivered. "You are truly one of these SEAL warriors." "Former SEAL," corrected, moving to the door and checking the corridor. "Retired 3 years ago. Now I really do work in logistics, but like they say back home, once a SEAL, always a SEAL." The corridor was clear, but heavy footsteps echoed from the left. Gestured right, and they moved quickly through the station. Other civilians were streaming toward safe zones, creating chaos that provided excellent cover. Guided through the crowd, his trained eyes constantly scanning for threats. They were 50 meters from Bay 17 when the remaining caught up. Plasma fire lit the corridor, civilians screaming and diving for cover, pushed ahead while turning to return fire, his shots precise and economical. One went down with a smoking hole in its chest plate. The others took cover. "Keep moving," shouted 2. He dropped his nearly empty magazine and slammed a fresh one home, a movement so practiced it took less than a second. More shots, more dead. But now others were joining the fight, various syndicate thugs drawn by the combat. Fought his way backward toward the bay, every movement efficient and deadly. This was what he had trained for, what had been burned into his muscle memory through thousands of hours of drills and dozens of real combat situations. A human weapon, optimized for violence. They reached Bay 17. Ship, the Midnight Runner, sat ready in its berth. He practically threw inside while laying down covering fire. A plasma bolt singed his shoulder, but he barely registered the pain. He was too focused, too deep in combat mode to notice anything that wasn't an immediate threat. Inside the ship, slapped the emergency departure sequence and dove into the pilot's chair. The runner's engines screamed to life, and they tore free of the station's docking clamps. More plasma fire splashed against their shields as they accelerated away from Zedge. Only when they had jumped to FTL did allow himself to relax slightly. His shoulder throbbed where the plasma had caught him, and his hands were shaking with adrenaline come-down. His platform rotated to face him. "You saved my life, why?" Began Field dressing his wound, working from the ship's medical kit. "Because you have information that can save a lot of other lives. The Syndicate is trafficking weapons to 3 different war zones in the outer reaches. My government needs to know the details so we can stop it." "Your government believes humans to be peaceful traders," observed. "We are," agreed. "Most of us, but we're also practical. Sometimes peace requires the capacity for violence. Just because we prefer trade doesn't mean we've forgotten how to fight." There was quiet for a moment, processing. "The galaxy sees humans as weak, soft. You have no natural armor, no claws, no venom. You're considered almost gentle by galactic standards." Laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Yeah, I've heard that. It's funny, really. Earth has killed more humans than every war we've ever fought combined. We evolved in a world that constantly tried to murder us. Predators, diseases, whether other humans. We're survivors, that's what we're best at. And your SEALs are survivors who got really, really good at making sure they're not the ones who die." Finished bandaging his shoulder and set the ship's autopilot for a safe waypoint. "Now, how about that information?" As began transmitting encrypted data files, stared out at the stars streaming past in FTL. He had left the teams 3 years ago, ready to be done with violence. But the galaxy, it seemed, had other plans. The Syndicate would know about him now. Word would spread through the criminal networks about the human who fought like a demon, who moved like death itself. No armor, no dog tags, nothing to officially mark him as military. But every instinct, every trained response, every scar on his body told the truth. He was a Navy SEAL, and some things went deeper than any uniform or identification. They were carved into your bones and burned into your soul. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had known for thousands of years. The most dangerous predators were the ones who looked harmless until the moment they struck, and Earth had spent perfecting that particular skill. Smiled to himself as the stars blurred past. He had been trying to leave the warrior behind, to just be a simple logistics coordinator. But maybe that had been naive. Maybe warriors like him would always be needed, especially out here where humanity was still proving itself among the stars. The Midnight Runner jumped through the void, carrying a retired SEAL and a terrified information broker towards safety. Behind them, on Edge, station security was finding the bodies. They would try to piece together what happened. They would check the surveillance footage already deleted. They would ask witnesses who would give conflicting accounts. But one thing would be consistent across every report. One detail that would be repeated with growing disbelief and fear. A human had walked into an ambush by Syndicate enforcers and walked out alive, leaving 7 dead aliens in his wake. A human with no armor, no backup, no heavy weapons. Just skill and determination and a particular kind of cold efficiency that most galactic species had never encountered. The Midnight Runner docked at Sanctuary Station 3 days later, a neutral facility in the territories where Earth maintained diplomatic offices. Had spent the transit time debriefing and transmitting preliminary reports through encrypted channels. The information the possessed was explosive, detailing weapons shipments that could destabilize entire sectors. What did not anticipate was the reception committee waiting at the airlock. Commander Sarah Vex stood there in full dress uniform, her expression somewhere between annoyed and impressed. Next to her stood an observer, its four eyes blinking independently as it examined through the viewport. "That's Earth military," observed nervously. "You said you were retired." "I am," assured but apparently someone wants to have words. The airlock cycled and stepped through with floating behind him. Commander Vex saluted crisply, which returned despite his civilian clothes. Old habits indeed. "Mr. Vex said formally. "Or should I say Lieutenant? Your retirement paperwork is very clear that you left active service, but events at Edge suggest otherwise." "I was conducting legitimate business when the Syndicate attacked," replied evenly. "I defended myself and extracted an asset with valuable intelligence, all within legal parameters for civilian self-defense." "Civilian self-defense," the interjected, its translator rendering its chittering speech into standard galactic, "does not typically result in 7 dead Syndicate enforcers, 3 destroyed surveillance systems, and 1 hijacked security protocol. The station administrators are demanding explanations. More importantly, the Syndicate has placed a bounty on your head, 50,000 credits." Whistled softly, "That much, I'm flattered." Vex's expression did not soften. "This isn't funny. Your actions have created a diplomatic incident. The Syndicate is claiming you're an Earth military operative conducting illegal operations in neutral space. They're demanding the Collective investigate human military activities." "Then it's fortunate I'm not military anymore," pointed out. "Check my records. I'm a registered civilian contractor working in logistics and trade negotiations." "Who just happens to fight like a SEAL team operator," Vex said dryly. "The cat's out of the bag. Your performance at Edge is all over the extranet. There's footage from before you scrubbed the systems. Every intelligence agency in 3 sectors is analyzing how you moved, how you fought, how you killed." The eyes focused on with uncomfortable intensity. "I am Observer L, assigned by the Collective Security Council. I have reviewed the footage Commander Vex mentions. You demonstrate combat capabilities far exceeding normal human parameters. Your reaction time, tactical awareness, and lethality are remarkable. The Council wishes to understand how Earth produces such warriors." Exchanged glances with Vex, who gave a microscopic shrug. This was bigger than either of them now. "Observer L, with respect, Earth's military training programs are our own business. Not when they produce operatives who can single-handedly eliminate Syndicate kill teams," L replied. "The Collective has maintained galactic stability for 3,000 cycles. Part of that stability requires understanding military capabilities of member species. Humans have been intentionally vague about your defense forces." "Because until now, no one took us seriously enough to ask," Vex interjected. "The prevailing galactic opinion was that humans are weak, soft products of an easy world. We saw no reason to correct that misconception." Suppressed a smile. That had been deliberate policy, he knew. Let the galaxy underestimate humanity while Earth quietly built up its capabilities and intelligence networks. The Syndicate attack had blown that strategy wide open, but maybe that wasn't entirely bad. "If I may interrupt," spoke up, its chemical signals translating through the speaker on its mobility platform, "I can provide context. I have studied Earth extensively as part of my profession. Humans are unique among collective species in several key ways." L's eyes swiveled toward the "explain." "Most spacefaring species evolved on worlds with limited environmental threats," began. For example, developed on a moon with no major predators and stable climate. Evolved as apex predators, but on a world with little competition. Even species from harsh environments typically faced singular, consistent challenges." "And Earth," L prompted. "Earth is a statistical anomaly. It has extreme climate variations, diverse ecosystems, thousands of predator species, and diseases that have repeatedly devastated human populations. Humans evolved not as the strongest or fastest or most armored species, but as the most adaptable. They learned to survive everywhere through intelligence, cooperation, and willingness to become whatever the environment demanded." Watch the process this information, its eyes blinking in complex patterns that suggested intense thought. Finally, L spoke. "You are suggesting humans are naturally selected for versatility." "Among other things," confirmed. "But more specifically, they are selected for problem-solving under life-threatening pressure. Every successful human ancestor survived countless near-death experiences. This has consequences for their neurology and behavior patterns." "Such as," Vex asked, genuinely curious now. Humans have unusually high adrenaline responses, allowing temporary increases in strength and pain tolerance. Their brains can enter states of hyperfocus during crisis situations. They form strong pack bonds that increase combat effectiveness. Most significantly, they have an unusual relationship with fear. Where most species flee from threats, humans often run toward them. That's not entirely accurate, objected. Plenty of humans run away from danger. But your elite warriors do not, Elle observed. Your SEALs, for instance, the training you endured deliberately induces maximum stress to identify individuals who perform better under extreme pressure. This is uncommon among galactic militaries. Considered how much to reveal. Finally, he decided honesty might serve humanity's interests better than secrecy. SEAL training has a roughly 75% failure rate. We don't wash people out because they're weak. We wash them out because they don't have the specific psychological profile needed for special operations. The ones who make it through have demonstrated they can think clearly when they're freezing, drowning, exhausted, and terrified. Why would anyone volunteer for such treatment? Elle asked, genuinely baffled. Because someone has to do the hard jobs, said simply. Because there are threats that require specialists willing to operate in the worst possible conditions. Because humans understand that peace isn't natural, it has to be defended. The four of them stood in silence for a moment. Then Vex spoke, her tone more sympathetic now. The situation is complicated. The Syndicate wants you dead. The Collective wants answers, and Earth's government would prefer you didn't become an interstellar incident. What do you suggest? Asked. The Council is offering a compromise, Elle said. You will be assigned as a liaison to a collective security investigating Syndicate activities. This gives you official status and diplomatic protection. In exchange, you will provide tactical consultation on human combat methodologies. Frowned, I'm retired. I left military service because I was tired of war. And yet war found you anyway, Vex pointed out. Face it, you're too good at what you do, and now everyone knows it. You can either work with the Collective officially or spend the rest of your life dodging bounty hunters and intelligence operatives trying to kidnap you for interrogation. Some choice, muttered. There is one additional factor, interjected. The data I provided details 3 major weapons shipments. All are scheduled for delivery within the next 20 standard days. If the Syndicate succeeds, approximately 3 million beings will die in the resulting conflicts. Closed his eyes. 3 million lives. That was the problem with being a warrior. You could try to walk away, but the work never really ended. There was always another threat, another mission, another group of people who would die if someone didn't stand up and fight. Fine, he said, opening his eyes. I'll join you, but I have conditions. Elle's eyes focused on him intently. State them. First, I'm not taking orders from anyone who hasn't seen combat. I'll respect the chain of command, but I won't follow tactical decisions from bureaucrats. Second, gets full asylum and protection on Earth if they want it. They risked everything providing this intelligence. Third, I want operational autonomy. You can tell me what needs done, but not how to do it. Those are significant demands, Elle observed. Non-negotiable, replied. I know my worth now, observer. The Syndicate put 50,000 credits on my head because I'm a threat to their operations. Either you value that threat level enough to meet my terms, or I walk away and you handle this yourselves. Vex looked like she wanted to strangle him, but Elle actually seemed pleased. You negotiate like a merchant. Very well, your conditions are acceptable with one modification. You will have a partner, someone to ensure cultural understanding and diplomatic protocol are maintained. Who? Me, Vex said with a sigh. Congratulations, you just got me reassigned from a comfortable desk job to field operations. Grinned, like you weren't bored out of your mind pushing paperwork. I'm going to make you regret this, Vex promised, but there was a hint of excitement in her eyes. Over the next several hours, they briefed on the composition. It was deliberately diverse, representatives from 8 different species with varying capabilities. There was a heavy weapons specialist built like a walking tank, a scout who could fly and fit through impossibly tight spaces, a demolitions expert who looked like a living crystal, and 4 others, each bringing unique skills. What became immediately clear was that none of them were warriors in the sense understood. They were security specialists, investigators, technicians. Good at their jobs, certainly, but not combat operators. They were a team built for evidence gathering and enforcement actions against criminals, not military operations against organized syndicates. The first team meeting confirmed concerns. They gathered in a secure briefing room, and L presented the intelligence had provided. 3 weapons shipments, each destined for different conflict zones. Standard collective procedure would be to notify local authorities, file diplomatic protests, and maybe board the ships for inspection if they could get jurisdiction. "That won't work," said Flatley. All eyes turned to him. They rumbled in irritation. "And what would you suggest, human? We follow established protocols." "Established protocols the syndicate has already accounted for," replied. "Look at the shipping routes. They're deliberately routed through territories with slow legal systems or compromised officials. By the time you file the paperwork and get authorization to act, those weapons will be delivered and millions will die." "So what is your alternative?" asked, its wings fluttering with agitation. Stood and moved to the display, manipulating the holographic star chart. "We intercept them here, here, and here. Simultaneous operations, maximum surprise. Board the ships, secure the weapons, capture the crew for interrogation." "That is piracy," stated, its crystalline body chiming with distress. "That's war," corrected. "The syndicate isn't playing by collective rules. They're a military organization masquerading as criminals. If we treat them like petty smugglers, we lose." L raised one primary limb. "The human makes a valid point. However, such operations would require capabilities our team currently lacks. Boarding actions, ship-to-ship combat, close quarters battle, these are not our specialties." "They're mine," said quietly. "I've done boarding actions in every environment you can imagine. Give me a small team, proper equipment, and tactical authority, and I can take those ships." Alone challenged. "I'd prefer backup," admitted. "But if necessary, yes, one SEAL can accomplish what most species require a full platoon to attempt." The room erupted in protests and objections. It was too risky, too aggressive, too much reliance on one individual. Let them talk themselves out, then spoke with calm authority. "I'm not asking permission. Observer L agreed to operational autonomy. I'm informing you of the plan. You can provide support, or you can stay in your ships and watch. Either way, those weapons don't reach their destinations." Commander Vex stood, silencing the protests. "For what it's worth, I've seen Lieutenant's operational record. If he says he can do this, I believe him. But you need to understand these people aren't trained for special operations. You'll be asking them to take risks they've never imagined." Nodded slowly. "Then we train them. We have 20 days. I can't make them SEALs, but I can teach them enough to stay alive and be useful. Anyone not willing to put in the work stays on the ship during operations." Stood to his full imposing height. "You think you can train me, human? I am a veteran of 40 enforcement actions." "Against criminals who didn't want to die," replied calmly. "The syndicate enforcers we'll face are trained soldiers willing to fight to the death. Different situation entirely. But if you think your 40 actions prepared you for what's coming, by all means, skip the training." The growled but said nothing, took that as acceptance. "For the next 2 weeks, put the team through an intensive crash course in combat operations. Nothing like actual SEAL training, but enough to give them basic." He taught them room-clearing techniques, buddy systems, cover and movement, basic small unit tactics. Most importantly, he taught them to move and think as a team. It was frustrating work. Species with completely different physiologies required completely different approaches. Could fly but had almost no mass for close combat. Was incredibly strong but slow. His crystalline body was partially transparent, useful for scouting but vulnerable to certain weapons. But they learned. More importantly, they began to respect what brought to the table. He demonstrated combat techniques they had never seen, movements and tactics that seemed impossible until he showed them step by step. He sparred with each of them, always winning but teaching them something new each time. Vex watched one training session where took on 3 team members simultaneously, disarming and incapacitating each in under 30 seconds. "How is it that a species with no natural weapons becomes so deadly?" she wondered aloud. "Because we had to be," replied, helping back to his feet. "On Earth, being human meant you were prey until you became predator. We learned to use tools, tactics, teamwork. We didn't have claws or armor or venom, so we invented them. And somewhere along the way, we got really, really good at violence." As the training progressed, something unexpected happened. The team began functioning as a unit, not just individuals working parallel tasks. They developed their own communication rhythms, learned each other's strengths and limitations, started anticipating each other's actions. Found himself impressed despite his initial skepticism. On day 14, they ran their first full mission simulation. The scenario involved boarding a hostile ship, neutralizing defenders, and securing a cargo hold, all within a 12-minute window. The first attempt was a disaster. The second was marginal. By the fifth run, they completed the objective in 11 minutes with 0 casualties. Again ordered. "We succeeded," protested. "Why repeat?" "Because success in simulation means nothing if you can't replicate it under stress," explained. "In real combat, you'll be terrified, exhausted, possibly injured. Your equipment might malfunction. Enemies might appear in unexpected locations. You need these procedures burned into muscle memory so you can execute them even when everything goes wrong." They ran it again, and again, and again. By day 16, they could complete the simulation in 9 minutes, even with randomly throwing in complications like simulated casualties or equipment failures. On day 18, Elle observed their final training exercise. The team moved through the simulation with practiced efficiency, each member knowing their role, covering angles, communicating constantly. When they finished, Elle's eyes blinked in complex patterns had learned indicated deep thought. "Remarkable," the finally said. "You have transformed a group of specialists into a combat unit in less than 3 weeks. How is this possible?" Shrugged. "It's what I was trained to do. SEALs don't just fight, we teach others to fight. Force multiplication, we call it. One operator can train dozens of indigenous forces to be effective fighters. I'm just applying the same principles here." "This is how Earth will operate in the galaxy," Elle said thoughtfully. "Not by fielding massive armies, but by enhancing the capabilities of others while maintaining your own elite forces." "Maybe," aloud. "Or maybe we'll just keep to ourselves and let the galaxy assume we're harmless. Worked pretty well until the Syndicate forced the issue." "The galaxy will not assume humans are harmless after this operation succeeds," Elle predicted. "Word has already spread about Sedge. When your team successfully interdicts 3 Syndicate weapons shipments, humanity's reputation will change permanently." Considered that as he watched his team clean their weapons and review tactical plans. Humanity had spent 15 years trying to be good neighbors, peaceful traders, reliable partners in the collective. All of that careful diplomacy might be about to change because one retired SEAL couldn't walk away from a fight. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the galaxy needed to understand that humans weren't just friendly, they were capable. That peace wasn't weakness, it was a choice. And that choice could be unmade if someone pushed hard enough. 3 million lives hung in the balance. 20 days had become 2 days. Tomorrow they would launch the first interdiction operation. Had trained his team as well as possible in the time available. Now they would discover if it was enough. Commander Vex found him in the observation deck late that night, staring out at the stars. "Can't sleep." "Pre-mission jitters," admitted. "Never goes away, no matter how many operations you run." "Is the team ready?" Considered the question honestly. "Ready as they can be. They're good people, Vex, smart, brave, willing to learn, but they're not warriors, not in the deep sense. They still see this as law enforcement, stopping criminals. They don't fully understand they're going to war." "And you do?" "I've never done anything else," said quietly. "Even when I wasn't officially military, even during my retirement, I was still a SEAL in my bones. It's not something you can leave behind. It changes you permanently." Vex was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Was it worth it? All the training, all the sacrifice, all the violence?" Thought about his teammates who hadn't made it home, about the operations that went wrong, about the nightmares that still woke him sometimes. But he also thought about the people he had saved, the threats he had stopped, the peace that existed because warriors stood ready to defend it. "Yes," he said finally. "Someone has to be willing to walk into hell so others don't have to. Might as well be people who are good at it." Tomorrow, he would prove that point again. The Syndicate thought they could operate with impunity, that the collective was too bound by rules and procedures to stop them effectively. They were about to discover they had badly miscalculated. Because the collective now had something they didn't prepare for. They had a human SEAL, trained to do the impossible, armed with nothing but skill and determination, and an absolute refusal to accept failure. No armor, no dog tags, nothing official to mark him as military. But every instinct, every movement, every decision marked as exactly what he was. A warrior from Earth, where evolution had spent creating the galaxy's most dangerous predator. A predator that looked harmless until the moment it struck. The stars wheeled silently beyond the viewport, indifferent to the coming violence. Watched them and prepared himself mentally for what tomorrow would bring. Blood would be shed. Lives would be lost. But 3 million people would survive because he and his team were willing to do the hard thing. The assault shuttle cut through space on minimal power, running dark to avoid detection. Checked his equipment for the third time, a ritual that helped calm pre-mission nerves. His team sat in the troop bay, each lost in their own thoughts as they approached the first target, the syndicate freighter Crimson Prophet. 5 minutes to intercept, Vex announced from the pilot's seat. Sensors show no indication they've detected us. Activated the team channel. Final systems check, sound off. Each team member confirmed their readiness, their voices carrying different levels of tension. Sounded confident, almost eager. Translator picked up nervous energy in the swing vibrations. Maintained crystalline calm, which had learned was this version of intense focus. "Remember the drill?" said, his voice steady and authoritative. "We breach the cargo bay simultaneously from 3 points. Team takes the port corridor and secure engineering. I take the bridge with Vex, and speed and surprise are our advantages. The syndicate crew will be mostly civilians, not soldiers, but they'll be armed. Do not hesitate if threatened, but avoid casualties where possible." "What if they surrender?" asked the team's medic, speaking for the first time since launch. "Then we secure them and move on," replied. "But don't expect it. The syndicate is known for fighting to the death rather than face interrogation. They're fanatics about operational security." The shuttle matched velocity with the freighter, approaching from its sensor shadow. Vex's piloting was flawless, bringing them alongside with barely a whisper of thruster emissions. Magnetic clamps locked on with soft thuds that vibrated through the assault craft. "Breach in 3, 2, 1, execute." 3 shaped charges detonated simultaneously, blowing circular holes through the freighter's hull. Atmosphere rushed out in explosive decompression before emergency bulkheads slammed shut. Dove through his breach point, weapon up, scanning for targets in the sudden chaos. The cargo bay was enormous, filled with containers that sensors identified as weapon crates. 3 crew members struggled in the vacuum, their emergency suits deployed but limiting their movement. Team secured them quickly, zip ties binding their limbs before they could mount resistance. "Cargo bay secure," reported. "Status." "Port corridor clear. 2 hostiles neutralized, non-lethal, moving to crew quarters." "Engineering secure. No resistance encountered, disabling FTL drives now." Nodded satisfaction. The operation was proceeding smoothly, almost too smoothly. His instincts, honed by years of combat, screamed warning. Something was wrong. "Vex, hold position at the bridge entrance," ordered. "With me, everyone stay sharp, this feels off." They moved through the freighter's corridors with practiced efficiency, clearing each compartment. The crew areas were empty, personal effects scattered as if abandoned in a hurry. The galley had food still cooking, automated systems maintaining meals no one would eat. "Where is everyone?" Vex wondered aloud. "Freighter this size should have at least 20 crew." Was wondering the same thing when his neural implant picked up an unusual energy signature. "Everyone out now, it's a trap." The freighter's reactor spiked. Grabbed and ran, his combat exoskeleton augmenting his strength as he literally threw the smaller alien toward the exit. Vex was already moving, years of military training overriding questions. "All teams, emergency extraction," shouted into the comm. "The ship is rigged to explode." They poured back through the breach points, diving into the assault shuttle as Vex fired the engines. The shuttle tore away from the freighter just as the reactor went critical. The explosion lit space like a newborn star electromagnetic pulse washing over their shuttle's shields. In the aftermath, floating in the debris field, team stared at what could have been their grave. Was the first to speak, his translator rendering his growl into standard galactic. "The syndicate was willing to sacrifice a shipment worth millions just to kill us." "Not us specifically," corrected, studying the debris patterns on sensors. "They knew someone would try to intercept based on the intelligence leak. This was insurance, a dead man's switch to deny us the cargo and eliminate whoever came for it. "How did you know?" asked, its wings still trembling with adrenaline. "Wrong patterns," explained. "Empty ship, automated systems, too easy penetration. In combat, when things go too smoothly, it usually means you're walking into a trap. SEALs learn to trust their instincts when something feels off." Vex was checking long-range sensors, her expression grim. "If they booby-trapped one shipment, they probably did the same to the others. We need to rethink our approach." Nodded slowly, mind racing through tactical options. The syndicate had proven more sophisticated than expected, willing to take significant losses to protect their operational security. That changed the equation. Observer L activated the comm link to their command ship. "We have a situation." After briefing L on the failed interdiction, laid out his revised plan. "The syndicate expects us to repeat the same approach on the remaining 2 shipments. We need to do something they won't anticipate." "Such as?" L's eyes blinked in rapid patterns. "We don't intercept the ships. We go after the receiving stations directly, hit them before the weapons arrive, capture the personnel, shut down their distribution networks, force the syndicate to abandon the whole operation." "That would require operations on sovereign worlds," L protested. "The Collective cannot authorize military action in member territories without extensive diplomatic approvals." "Then we don't operate as collective forces," said. "We go in dark, no official backing, no identification. If we succeed, it's attributed to local law enforcement. If we fail, the Collective maintains plausible deniability." Vex looked horrified. "That's an unsanctioned black operation. We could start an interstellar incident." "We're already in an incident," pointed out. "The syndicate just tried to kill a collective. They're escalating because they think we'll back down when things get dangerous. Time to prove them wrong." Growl carried approval. "The human speaks wisdom. We came to stop weapons shipments. Whether we do so in space or on the ground makes no difference to the final outcome." "It makes enormous difference to legal and diplomatic standings," L argued, but could hear the consideration in this tone. "However, the human is correct that conventional approaches have failed. If we are to succeed, we must adapt our methods." Over the next 6 hours, they planned 2 simultaneous operations targeting the receiving stations on Prime and Station. Both were technically neutral territory, but with governments known to be syndicate-friendly. Official collective intervention would take months of negotiations. Covert operations could be completed in days. The prime target was a warehouse district controlled by local organized crime with syndicate backing. Intelligence suggested the weapons would be stored there briefly before distribution to 3 different conflict zones. Would lead that operation personally with, and 2 additional operators. The station target was more complicated, a legitimate shipping facility with underground connections to syndicate operations. Vex would command that mission with, and the remaining team members. "We hit them simultaneously," outlined. "Maximum confusion, no time for either location to warn the other. Fast in, secure the weapons, extract any intelligence we can find, fast out. 30 minutes on target maximum." "And if local authorities respond?" Vex asked. "We avoid engagement if possible. This isn't a war against legitimate governments, it's an operation against criminal elements. But if pressed, we defend ourselves and extract. The mission objective is stopping those weapons, everything else is secondary." They spent 2 days positioning assets, gathering intelligence, and refining their approach. Personally scouted the prime site using a micro-drone, mapping interior layouts and security patterns. The warehouse was heavily guarded, but guards were predictable. They followed routines, trusted their technology, grew complacent during quiet hours. SEALs specialized in exploiting complacency. The operation launched at 300 local time, when biological rhythms made most species least alert. His team approached from the warehouse district's industrial sector, moving through shadows and sensor-blind spots. His combat suit adjusted its coloration to match surroundings, making him nearly invisible in the dim lighting. They reached the outer perimeter without incident. Used precise crystalline resonance to disable the security sensors, their skill with manipulating electromagnetic fields proving invaluable. The main door was secured with DNA locks and electronic verification, but had prepared for that. "You're up," whispered The massive stepped forward and simply tore the door from its reinforced frame, his species' incredible strength making sophisticated locks irrelevant. Alarms shrieked, but that was expected. Speed mattered now, not stealth. They poured through the entrance, weapons ready. The warehouse opened into a vast space filled with shipping containers. Guards rushed from break rooms and security stations, reaching for weapons. His team moved with practiced precision, each member knowing their sector, covering angles, moving as one organism. Dropped 3 guards with stunning shots before they could return fire. Absorbed plasma bolts on his heavy armor and responded with devastating force, his weapons designed for his massive strength. Shifted through their crystalline form, becoming nearly transparent, appearing behind guards who never saw death coming. The firefight lasted 90 seconds. When silence fell, 12 guards were down, stunned, or dead, and his team controlled the warehouse. Additional guards would be responding soon, but they had a brief window. "Find those weapons," ordered. "Access their computer systems. I want everything, shipping records, financial transactions, personnel rosters." They worked with urgent efficiency, scanning containers, downloading data, photographing everything relevant. Simplant recorded it all, ensuring intelligence would survive even if they didn't. 5 minutes into the search, they found the weapons, military-grade plasma rifles, portable missile systems, and enough ammunition to supply a small army. "Confirmed," reported to L. "We have the weapons, requesting immediate extraction." "Negative," L responded, alarm clear in the translation. "Local military forces are responding to your location. You have 8 minutes before they establish perimeter." "Copy that. Rigging charges now." Pulled out demolition packs, placing them strategically throughout the warehouse. "These weapons don't leave here except as atoms." Human rumbled, "We have company." More guards were arriving, but these wore different uniforms, military rather than security. They took professional positions, establishing overlapping fields of fire, moving with tactical discipline. These weren't rent-a-cops, they were soldiers. "Syndicate regulars," identified. "They knew we'd come here, it's another trap." "Exit routes are compromised," reported, their crystalline form refracting light as they scanned sensor feeds. "They have the building surrounded." His mind raced through options. They were outnumbered, with hostile forces closing in from multiple vectors. Conventional tactics would result in their capture or death. Time for unconventional thinking. "Can you breach the floor?" The look down at the reinforced warehouse floor, then at understanding dawning. Into the possibly, but it would take time. "We're buying you that time. Help him. Everyone else establish defensive positions, make them work for every meter." The firefight that followed would be analyzed by military strategists for years, and his reduced team held off 40 syndicate soldiers using superior positioning, tactical awareness, and skills honed through years of training. They didn't fight to kill, they fought to delay, to control enemy movement, to buy precious seconds for and to break through. Plasma fire scorched the air. Explosions rocked the warehouse as both sides employed grenades and heavier weapons. Moved like water, flowing from position to position, never where enemies expected, always presenting hard targets, always punishing mistakes with lethal precision. "Breakthrough," announced. "We have access to maintenance tunnels." "Everyone fall back," ordered, laying down covering fire. "Move, move, move." They dropped through the breach just as the demolition charges detonated. The warehouse erupted in fire, vaporizing millions of credits worth of weapons and erasing evidence of their presence. The explosion bought them critical minutes as syndicate forces regrouped and assessed damage. In the tunnels beneath Prime, his team ran through darkness, his crystalline body providing luminescence. Behind them, pursuit teams attempted to follow, but the tunnels were a maze that required local knowledge to navigate. "We need extraction from the transmitted. Sending coordinates now." "Acknowledged. Shuttle inbound, ETA 4 minutes. Be advised, Commander Vex's team has successfully secured their objective with minimal casualties. The Syndicate presence at station has been neutralized." That was good news, but couldn't celebrate yet. They still had to reach the extraction point alive. His team was exhausted, one of the additional operators was wounded, and Syndicate forces were mobilizing throughout the. They emerged in an industrial sector, machinery roaring around them. The extraction shuttle was there, Vex herself piloting, weapons systems active. "Get aboard," she shouted over the comm. Team scrambled into the shuttle just as Syndicate forces appeared, plasma fire splashing against the craft's shields. Vex launched immediately, throttle at maximum, the shuttle screaming up through Prime's atmosphere with enemies in pursuit. Multiple hostile craft inbound, Vex announced. Hold on, this is going to get rough. She wasn't kidding. Vex flew like a demon, using the shuttle's superior maneuverability to dodge enemy fire while climbing toward orbit. Strapped in and activated the shuttle's defensive systems, targeting incoming missiles and enemy fighters. A Syndicate corvette appeared ahead, weapons charging. It was a warship far more powerful than their assault shuttle. They were outmatched, about to be destroyed by overwhelming firepower. Made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed in conventional military. Vex rammed them. What? Not a joke. Full speed, angle for their forward weapons array. Our shields can take one hit from their main guns at point blank. Theirs can't take a direct collision. Oh, that's insane. It's a calculated risk based on shield harmonics and structural integrity metrics. Trust me. Vex looked at him for one heartbeat, then her expression hardened with determination. If we die, I'm killing you in the afterlife. She angled the shuttle directly at the corvette, maximum thrust, every system screaming in protest. The corvette's crew realized the danger too late, attempting evasive maneuvers that a ship that size simply couldn't execute quickly enough. Impact, the shuttle's reinforced prow smashed into the corvette's forward section, shields flaring brilliant white as incomprehensible energies clashed. The corvette's weapons array exploded, secondary detonations rippling through its hull. The shuttle tumbled end over end, shields failing, hull breached in 3 locations. But they were alive and the corvette was crippled. Vex fought to regain control, firing maneuvering thrusters compensating for the damage. Engineering status. Engines at 40%, shields down, weapons offline, reported from the back. But we can still fly. Then we fly, said. Get us to the rendezvous point, we're not done yet. They limped into space, pursued by more Syndicate forces, but now with collective security ships responding to the engagement. L's command vessel appeared, its weapons discouraging further pursuit. The message was clear. The operation might have been unofficial, but the collective would protect its people. Aboard the command vessel, battered and exhausted, team received medical attention while L debriefed them. The operation had been messy, violent, and had created exactly the diplomatic incident everyone feared, but it had also succeeded. 2 weapons shipments destroyed, the 3rd abandoned by the Syndicate when news of our operations spread, L summarized. 3 million lives saved, and the Syndicate's operations in this sector severely disrupted. However, there will be consequences. Bring them, said tiredly. We did what was necessary. The Syndicate was willing to kill millions. We stopped them. If that creates political problems, I'll deal with them. The political problems may be less severe than expected, L admitted. Your actions have created something unexpected, fear. Fear, Vex asked. The Syndicate believed themselves untouchable, protected by complexity and bureaucracy. In 72 hours, 1 human operator and a small team penetrated their security, destroyed their operations, and forced them into retreat. They now understand that humans cannot be underestimated, that your species possesses capabilities they failed to account for. Understood what L wasn't saying directly. Humanity's reputation had shifted permanently. They were no longer seen as harmless newcomers. They were recognized as threats, as warriors, as a species that could project force with terrifying efficiency. How is the collective responding? Asked. With considerable debate, L admitted. Some species are frightened, calling for restrictions on human military capabilities. Others are impressed, suggesting closer cooperation with Earth's forces. The Council is split. And you, Vex asked, what's your assessment? L's 4 eyes blinked in complex patterns. I believe humanity represents something the galaxy has not encountered in, a species that is simultaneously peaceful and capable of extreme violence. You prefer cooperation but excel at conflict. This makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability creates strategic advantage. Smiled tiredly. That's very diplomatic of you, observer. What you're really saying is that we scare you. Yes, L agreed simply. You scare me. One human, no armor, no official military status, no heavy weapons, managed to accomplish what conventional collective forces would require months to attempt. If Earth can produce more like you, if your seals are truly as capable as demonstrated, then humanity could reshape galactic power dynamics. We don't want to reshape anything, protested. We just want to live peacefully and trade with our neighbors. Perhaps, El said, but the galaxy now knows what humanity is capable of when threatened. That knowledge cannot be undone. Earth must decide how to proceed with this new reality. Over the following days, as recovered from his injuries and the diplomatic fallout played out, he had time to reflect. He had left the teams 3 years ago, hoping to leave the warrior behind. But the galaxy had other plans. Violence had found him, and he had responded with all the training and skill he possessed. The question now was what came next. Earth's government would need to address the galaxy's concerns. Humanity's military capabilities were no longer secret. The quiet expansion of human intelligence networks and special operations forces would now face scrutiny and demands for transparency. Commander Vex found him in the observation deck, his usual spot for contemplation. "Penny for your thoughts." "Just wondering if I've made things worse," admitted. "I was trying to save lives, but maybe I've endangered more by revealing too much about human capabilities." "You saved 3 million lives," Vex reminded him. "That's not nothing. As for the rest, humanity would have had to show its teeth eventually. Better to do it on our terms, stopping an actual threat, than to have it revealed in some worse context." "Maybe," aloud, "but the galaxy sees me as something I'm not. They think every human is potentially as dangerous as a seal. That's not true. Seals are the extreme outliers, the statistical anomalies. Most humans are just normal people trying to live quiet lives." "But every species has its warriors," Vex countered. "The difference is that humanity's warriors seem to be particularly effective. That's not your fault, that's just evolutionary outcome. Earth made you this way." Stared out at the stars, considering that. Earth had made him, shaped him through millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of military tradition. He was the product of a world that constantly tried to kill humanity, forcing adaptation and survival at any cost. "El asked me a question before we left," said. "Wanted to know if I thought humanity would become a military power in the galaxy." "What did you tell them?" "That it depends on whether the galaxy makes us. Humans prefer peace, but we're very good at war. If forced to choose between being victims and being threats, we'll choose being threats every time." Vex nodded slowly. "That's probably the most honest assessment anyone has given the collective. Most species try to downplay their military capabilities or exaggerate them for intimidation. Leave it to a human to just tell the uncomfortable truth." "It's what seals do," said. "We assess situations honestly, acknowledge reality, and act accordingly. Pretty sure that's why the galaxy finds us unsettling. We don't posture or perform, we just are." News arrived the next day. The syndicate had collapsed across 3 sectors, its leadership in chaos, its operations disrupted. Multiple governments were moving against syndicate assets, emboldened by the success. The weapons that would have killed millions were seized or destroyed. The conflicts they were meant to fuel would not escalate. 3 million lives saved. That was the number that mattered too. The diplomatic complications, the fear he had generated, the changed perception of humanity, all of that was noise compared to the fundamental fact. He had done his job. He had protected the innocent and stopped the guilty. That night, alone in his quarters, finally removed the small metal object he still carried despite his retirement. His seal trident, the pin worn by graduates of basic underwater demolition seal training. He had put it away 3 years ago, trying to leave that identity behind. Now he pinned it back on his civilian jacket, not as a statement or symbol, but as acknowledgement. He was a seal. That would never change, regardless of official status. The galaxy now knew it too. No armor, no dog tags, nothing official to mark him as military. But every alien who encountered would recognize what he was. A warrior from Earth, forged in the crucible of humanity's violent history, carrying thousands of years of military tradition in his bones. The galaxy had learned that humanity was more than friendly traders and peaceful explorers. They were also predators, capable of extraordinary violence when necessary. That knowledge would change everything, and had been the one to teach that lesson. He stood at the viewport, watching stars drift past, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. More threats, certainly. More violence, probably. But also more opportunities to save lives, to protect the innocent. The summons came 6 weeks after the syndicate operations concluded. Was finishing a routine equipment inspection when Commander Vex appeared at his quarters aboard Sanctuary Station, her expression carefully neutral in the way that meant complicated news. "The Galactic Council wants to see you," she said without preamble. "In person on Prime." Set down the plasma pistol he had been cleaning. "That's the collective capital. They only summon people there for major diplomatic situations." "Or major problems," Vex agreed. "Observer L thinks it's both. Apparently, your actions have created ripples far beyond what anyone anticipated. There are species demanding restrictions on human military operations. Others want to hire human advisors. A few are talking about preemptive sanctions." "Sanctions? We stopped a weapons trafficking operation that their own security forces couldn't handle." "Which is exactly the problem," Vex explained, sitting across from him. "You made them look incompetent. Worse, you made them feel vulnerable. If one human with a small team can accomplish what their massive security apparatus cannot, what does that say about their capabilities?" Understood the politics even if he disliked them. Power dynamics in the galaxy were built on carefully maintained perceptions of strength and capability. Humanity had disrupted those perceptions dramatically. "When do they want me there?" 3 days. L will accompany you along with Earth's official ambassador. Fair warning, this isn't going to be pleasant. Some council members see you as a hero. Others see you as a threat that needs to be contained. The journey to Prime took 2 days through various jump points and security checkpoints. The planet was beautiful from orbit, a carefully maintained world that served as neutral ground for all collective species. No weapons were permitted on the surface except for official security forces. No military vessels could enter the system without explicit council authorization. Felt naked without his usual arsenal as they descended to the planet's capital city. Ambassador, no relation, though they joked about it, met them at the spaceport, a career diplomat who looked perpetually worried. "Lieutenant," the ambassador greeted him formally, "I need you to understand the situation. The Council is divided on humanity's role in the collective. Your actions have forced debates that would normally take decades into compressed. Some species see opportunity, others see danger." "What does Earth want me to say?" asked. "The truth," the ambassador replied. "Don't minimize what you did, but don't exaggerate either. Let them understand that humanity is capable of defending itself and its interests, but that we prefer peaceful cooperation." The council chambers were impressive, a massive circular hall with seating for representatives from 47 different species. At the center stood a raised platform where those addressing the council would speak. Walked to that platform with L at his side, acutely aware of hundreds of alien eyes examining him. The council speaker, an ancient whose wings had dulled with age, opened the proceedings. "We gather to address the matter of Lieutenant Human Operator who conducted military operations across multiple sovereign territories, resulting in significant casualties and property damage. Lieutenant, how do you answer these charges?" Stood straight, hands behind his back in a military rest position he couldn't break even if he tried. "I acted to prevent weapons shipments that would have resulted in 3 million deaths across 3 conflict zones. The syndicate was operating across multiple territories, using sovereignty claims to shield their activities from legitimate law enforcement. When conventional approaches failed and direct action became necessary, I led operations to neutralize the threat." "Without authorization," a representative interjected. "Without regard for sovereignty or diplomatic protocol, you acted as a rogue element accountable to no authority." "I acted under the authority of a collective security," corrected. "Observer L authorized the operations after standard approaches proved ineffective. We operated in accordance with established emergency protocols when imminent threats required immediate response." Though was not satisfied. "You destroyed syndicate assets worth hundreds of millions of credits. You killed 43 beings. You violated territorial integrity of sovereign worlds. These are acts of war, not law enforcement." "The syndicate committed acts of war when they attempted to arm conflicts that would have destabilized entire sectors," replied calmly. "They killed members of our Edge. They booby-trapped ships to murder investigators. At what point does law enforcement end and self-defense begin?" "You could have requested assistance from local authorities," a representative suggested. Local authorities were compromised, L interjected, speaking for the first time. My investigation revealed that syndicate operations were protected by officials in multiple governments. Standard protocols would have resulted in intelligence leaks and operation failures. Lieutenant's approach, while unconventional, achieved objectives that conventional methods could not. Debate raged for hours. Some council members praised actions, pointing to the lives saved and threats neutralized. Others condemned the precedent, arguing that special operations by individual species undermined collective authority. A few simply wanted to understand how a single human had accomplished so much. It was a scholar, not a council member, but invited as expert witness, who asked the question that cut to the heart of the matter. Lieutenant, I have studied your species extensively since Sedge. I have reviewed Earth's history, your military traditions, your training methodologies. I wish to understand, not for political purposes, but for genuine knowledge, what makes human warriors so effective. The chamber fell silent. This was the question everyone wanted answered, but few had dared ask directly, considered his response carefully. Earth is a death world, he began. Most species here evolved on planets that were relatively stable with consistent climates and limited threats. Earth is not like that. Our planet has ice ages and heat waves, hurricanes and earthquakes, droughts and floods. It has thousands of predator species that evolved alongside humans, constantly hunting us, forcing us to adapt or die. Paused, gathering his thoughts. Humans are not the strongest species on Earth. We're not the fastest or most armored. We're not venomous or particularly large. What we are is adaptable. We learned to survive everywhere, from Arctic ice to equatorial jungles to barren deserts. We became endurance hunters, chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We learned to cooperate in ways that are effectiveness. We became tool users, creating weapons and tactics to overcome physical limitations. The scholar listened intently. But this describes evolutionary adaptation, not military superiority. Evolution is military superiority, countered. Every successful human ancestor survived countless life-threatening situations. That selective pressure shaped our neurology, our psychology, our fundamental approach to threats. Where many species have evolved to minimize risk, humans evolved to manage and overcome risk. We run toward danger instead of away from it. We see problems as challenges to solve rather than situations to avoid. He looked around the chamber, meeting alien eyes. SEAL training doesn't create these capabilities. It identifies and refines them. We find individuals whose neurological makeup allows them to perform under extreme stress. Then we expose them to every horrible situation we can imagine. Drowning, hypothermia, sleep deprivation, hunger, pain, fear, exhaustion. The ones who can still think clearly and execute complex tasks under those conditions become SEALs. This sounds like torture, a representative protested. It's preparation, replied. Because real combat is worse. When you're being shot at, when teammates are dying, when everything is going wrong and you're terrified and exhausted, you need to be able to still function. SEAL training ensures we can. It's harsh, but it works. A representative raised an appendage. You describe your training as if all human warriors receive it. Surely this cannot be true. No, admitted. SEALs are a small, specialized unit, a few thousand operators among billions of humans. But every major human nation has similar elite forces, trained in comparable methods. Rangers, Special Forces, Special Air Service, dozens of others. We all follow similar principles because those principles work. And what are those principles? The scholar asked. Thought about his years in the teams, about the men who had trained him and those he had trained in turn. Train harder than the enemy, prepare for worst-case scenarios, trust your teammates absolutely, adapt constantly, never quit. Accept that you might die but refuse to accept failure. Those are the principles. The council speaker gestured for silence as debate threatened to erupt again. Lieutenant, you have explained human military philosophy, but you have not addressed the central question. Should humanity be permitted to operate military forces independently within collective space? That's a question for diplomats, not operators, replied. I'm a tool, not a policymaker. You point me at problems, I solve them. How Earth chooses to employ forces like me is a political decision I'm not qualified to make. But you have opinions, the speaker pressed. Considered carefully before responding. I believe humanity should contribute to collective security in ways that leverage our capabilities. We're good at special operations, intelligence gathering, training others, unconventional warfare. We can be valuable partners if you let us. but we won't be disarmed or restricted just because our effectiveness makes others uncomfortable. That sounds like a threat, the representative said. It's a statement of fact, corrected. Earth spent 15 years trying to be good neighbors, trading peacefully, avoiding confrontation. The Syndicate attacked us anyway. They saw our preference for peace as weakness. We corrected that misconception. The galaxy now understands we can defend ourselves. That's not a threat, it's clarity. The debate continued for another 2 hours before the council called a recess. Retreated to a waiting room with Elle and Ambassador, exhausted from the mental sparring. You did well, the ambassador said. Better than I expected, honestly. You were honest without being aggressive, confident without being arrogant. How do you think they'll rule? Asked. Split decision, Elle predicted. Some species will demand restrictions, others will seek partnerships. The Council will likely authorize a framework for human military operations with oversight provisions. Not ideal for anyone, but acceptable to most. Nodded, that was politics, compromises that left everyone partially unsatisfied. He could live with that as long as Earth maintained operational autonomy. During the recess, something unexpected happened. A young approached, its wings fluttering with nervous energy. Lieutenant, I am Offspring. They told me you saved their life during the station operation. Smiled, saved themselves. I just provided training and support. They say you are the finest warrior they have ever witnessed, continued. They say human combat methods are far superior to conventional collective approaches. They wish to learn more. That's flattering, but I'm not currently teaching. Perhaps you should be, a new voice interjected. Turned to see a delegation approaching, led by a crystal being that shimmered with multiple colors. I am Crystalline Voice Among Stones, Commander of Defense Forces. I have reviewed footage of your operations. Your tactics are remarkable. More representatives approached, each wanting to speak with the human who had demonstrated such unusual capabilities. Some were military leaders seeking knowledge, others were diplomats exploring possibilities. A few were simply curious about this species that seemed so different from galactic norms. Found himself inadvertently conducting a master class in human military philosophy, explaining concepts that seemed obvious to him but revolutionary to species that had evolved different approaches to conflict. The idea of deliberately seeking the hardest possible training was foreign to most. The concept of training until failure to identify limits was seen as wasteful. The willingness to accept high casualty rates during training was viewed as almost barbaric. We lose more SEAL candidates to training than to combat, explained to a fascinated group. That's intentional. Better to discover someone can't handle the stress during training than during a real mission when lives depend on them. But this wastes resources, an officer protested. Why not simply modify the training to ensure higher success rates? Because modified training produces modified results, replied. If we make training easier, we get operators who are less capable. The difficulty is the point. It ensures only those who can genuinely handle extreme conditions make it through. Crystalline Voice Among Stones chimed thoughtfully. This suggests humans view military service differently than most species. For us, warriors are selected based on existing capabilities. You select based on potential capabilities revealed through stress. Exactly, confirmed. We assume everyone has limits. Training finds those limits and teaches you to push past them. The people who can consistently push past their limits become elite operators. The informal gathering continued until the council reconvened. When returned to the central platform, he sensed the mood had shifted. The debate was less hostile, more thoughtful. Representatives asked genuine questions rather than making accusations. Finally, the council speaker announced their decision. After extensive deliberation, the council recognizes that humanity possesses unique military capabilities that could benefit collective security. However, these capabilities must be employed within appropriate frameworks. Therefore, we propose the following arrangement. The terms were surprisingly reasonable. Earth would be authorized to maintain special operations forces for deployment in collective space, but under oversight by a joint military committee. Human advisors could be assigned to train collective security forces in specialized tactics. Information about human military methods would be shared through controlled channels to prevent misuse. In exchange, humanity would gain preferential trading status, enhanced diplomatic standing, and guaranteed protection for Earth's interests throughout collective space. It was, Ambassador whispered, a better deal than anyone had expected. Lieutenant, the council speaker addressed him directly, you have demonstrated both the capabilities and the responsibilities that come with exceptional warrior skills. The council recognizes your service and offers commendation for lives saved during the syndicate operations. Do you accept these terms on behalf of humanity? I accept on behalf of myself, replied carefully. The decision to participate in this framework is Earth's to make, not mine, but personally I believe it's a fair arrangement that serves everyone's interests. The council session concluded with surprising applause from several delegations. As left the chambers, he was surrounded by representatives wanting to discuss training partnerships, advisory roles, intelligence sharing arrangements. Humanity had gone from being underestimated newcomers to recognized military power in a matter of weeks. That evening stood on an observation balcony overlooking Prime's capital, processing everything that had happened. Elle joined him, his eyes blinking in complex patterns. You changed the galaxy today, Elle observed. I just answered questions honestly, protested. Honesty is sometimes revolutionary, Elle replied. The collective has operated for thousands of years under certain assumptions about warfare, security, and capability. Humanity has challenged those assumptions merely by existing and operating according to your nature. Is that good or bad? Both, neither, different. Elle's eyes focused on the distant stars. I have been observing species for most of my life, trying to understand what makes civilizations succeed or fail. I believe humanity represents something unique. You are simultaneously primitive and advanced, aggressive and cooperative, individualistic and tribal. You contradict yourselves constantly. Is that a compliment? Asked Riley. It is an observation. Humans contain multitudes, as one of your poets said. You can be gentle teachers and ruthless killers, sometimes in the same individual. This makes you unpredictable, which is strategically valuable. Thought about his own contradictions. He genuinely preferred peace and had left military service hopping to avoid violence. Yet when violence found him, he had responded with lethal efficiency and no hesitation. He valued life but was trained to end it. He sought cooperation but excelled at combat. Maybe that's what Earth does to you, mused. It teaches you that life is precious and fragile, but also that it requires constant defense. We learn to love peace while being prepared for war. That may be humanity's greatest contribution to the collective, Elle said thoughtfully. Most species see peace and war as opposites, mutually exclusive states. Humans understand they are connected, that the capacity for war makes peace possible. News from Earth arrived the next day. The government had reviewed the Council's proposal and accepted the terms. Was offered a position as liaison between Earth's Special Operations Command and the Collective Security Forces, essentially continuing what he had been doing, but with official authorization and support. He accepted, not because he wanted to return to military life, but because the galaxy needed what he could provide. Expertise, training, a different perspective on security challenges. He could save lives by teaching others how to fight more effectively, how to prepare for worst cases, how to be hard targets that evil avoided. Over the following months, trained security forces from a dozen species. He taught them room clearing, close quarters combat, tactical movement, crisis decision-making. Some adapted well to human methods, others struggled with concepts foreign to their evolutionary backgrounds. But all came away with new capabilities and perspectives. His students began to understand what made human warriors different. It wasn't superior technology or overwhelming numbers. It was mindset, attitude, willingness to embrace discomfort and danger as necessary parts of the job. It was the ability to stay calm when everything was going wrong, to think clearly under pressure, to adapt rapidly to changing situations. Word spread through military circles across the galaxy. Human training methods were harsh but effective. Human tactics were unconventional but successful. Humans themselves were still mostly peaceful traders and explorers, but when pushed, they could fight with terrifying competence. Received updates about how his operations had affected galactic politics. The syndicate had collapsed entirely, its leadership scattered or captured. Other criminal organizations had become more cautious, aware that the collective now had teeth. Conflicts that might have escalated were being resolved diplomatically, partly because no one wanted to face human special operators. It was strange to realize he had become a deterrent, a symbol of humanity's martial capabilities. He was just one man doing his job, but the galaxy saw something larger. They saw proof that humanity could not be pushed around, that Earth's preference for peace did not indicate weakness. Commander Vex visited him on Sanctuary Station after a successful training operation. "You've become famous," she teased. "There are species that tell stories about the human warrior who fights like a demon and thinks like a computer." "I'm just a SEAL," protested. "There are thousands like me back on Earth." "That's what terrifies them," Vex replied, but she was smiling. "The idea that Earth has thousands of warriors with your capabilities, and most of them are content to stay home and let the galaxy forget they exist. It's the ultimate deterrent, the threat you don't have to use because everyone knows it's there." Thought about his former teammates, scattered across Earth and human space, many living quiet civilian lives. They had skills comparable to his, experience measured in decades, capabilities that could change battlefields. Most would never deploy again unless absolutely necessary. But the potential existed, and now the galaxy knew it. A month later, received an unusual message. I wanted to meet with him, someone from the species that had initially questioned human military capabilities most aggressively. The meeting location was neutral, on Sanctuary Station that catered to various species. The was older from years of military service, wearing what recognized as medals from multiple campaigns. They sat across from each other, predator eyes assessing predator eyes. "Lieutenant," the began, "I am General, formerly of the species you would call aggressive militarists. I commanded forces in 3 sector wars. I have killed more beings than I can count. I tell you this so you understand I speak from experience, not theory." "I'm listening," said neutrally. "I underestimated your species," admitted. "I saw humans as weak, soft, lacking the necessary aggression for true warfare. I was wrong. You are perhaps the most dangerous warriors I have encountered precisely because your aggression is controlled, channeled, weaponized through training and discipline." "What changed your mind?" "I reviewed your operations extensively. Not just the outcomes, but the methods. You anticipate enemy actions, you adapt to circumstances, you leverage advantages most species would not recognize. This is not natural warrior instinct. It is learned capability refined over generations. It is sophisticated in ways our approach is not." Nodded slowly. "Your species fights with honor and direct confrontation. That's a valid approach, but it has limitations." "Yes," agreed. "And I believe my people could learn from yours, which is why I am here. I wish to hire you or warriors like you to train special forces in human methods. We are willing to pay significantly for this service." It was a remarkable offer from a species known for pride and independence. Considered the implications. Training in SEAL methods could create powerful allies or dangerous enemies if relationships soured. But it could also build bridges, create understanding between species that approached warfare very differently. "I'll need to discuss this with Earth's command structure," said. "But I'm interested in principle. Though I should warn you, human training methods are brutal by most standards. Your troops will hate me before we're done." "Good," said with what might have been a smile. "Hatred means they are being challenged. Comfort means they are being coddled. We seek challenge." The conversation continued for hours. 2 warriors from different worlds finding common ground in shared understanding of combat's realities. By the time they parted, had agreed in principle to develop a training program adapted for physiology and psychology. Walking back to his quarters, reflected on the strange path his life had taken. He had tried to retire, to leave the warrior behind. Instead, he had become more central to Earth's military operations than ever, just in a different capacity. Instead of conducting missions, he was shaping how others approached them. Instead of being one deadly operator, he was creating hundreds. Maybe this was what he was meant to do, what his years in the teams had prepared him for. Not to be a lone warrior, but to be a teacher, a bridge between humanity's hard-won military knowledge and a galaxy that needed those lessons. His comm chimed with a message from Admiral back on Earth. "Congratulations, Lieutenant. You've done more for Earth's strategic position in 6 months than most diplomats accomplish in careers. Keep up the good work, and stay safe. The galaxy needs you alive more than it needs you heroic." Smiled at that, typical military thinking. A live expert was more valuable than a dead hero. But the Admiral had a point. He had become a strategic asset, someone who could shape interstellar relations through training and expertise rather than violence. No armor, no dog tags, nothing official to mark him as military. But every alien he encountered recognized what he was. A warrior from Earth, trained in methods most species couldn't comprehend, carrying expertise earned through years of the hardest service humanity offered. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity through his actions. Now it would learn to understand humanity through his teaching. Violence had opened the door, but knowledge would build the bridge. That was the path forward, the way to ensure Earth's safety without constant conflict. As settled into his quarters, preparing for the next training cycle, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had saved lives, prevented wars, built partnerships, and taught valuable lessons. Not bad for a retired SEAL who just wanted to work in logistics. The galaxy was changing, adapting to humanity's presence, learning to see Earth not as a minor trading partner, but as a significant military power. And one human without armor or official status had been the catalyst for that transformation. Sometimes the most effective weapons were the ones that never had to fire. Sometimes the best victories were the ones won through reputation and respect rather than bloodshed. Had learned those lessons the hard way, through years of combat and loss. Now he was teaching them to others, spreading the wisdom that Earth had earned through of warfare. The stars shone beyond his viewport, cold and distant and beautiful. Somewhere out there, threats still existed, wars still brewed, violence still waited. But Earth was ready now, recognized and respected, feared where necessary and valued where possible. All because one SEAL refused to quit, refused to accept failure, refused to let the crisis begin on a quiet morning, the kind that made you forget the galaxy could be dangerous. Was reviewing training schedules in his office aboard Sanctuary Station when Admiral's face appeared on his secure comm screen, expression grim. "We have a situation, big one. The Collective Council is calling an emergency session and they specifically requested your presence. How fast can you get to Prime?" 6 hours if I take a fast courier, replied, already standing and gathering his gear. "What's the situation?" "First contact. A species we've never encountered before just entered collective space with a fleet of warships. They're calling themselves the Ascendancy, and they're demanding submission of all lesser species to their authority. They've already destroyed 3 border outposts to demonstrate their technological superiority." Felt his blood run cold. First contact scenarios were always delicate, but an aggressive militaristic civilization arriving with demands was nightmare fuel. What's the Collective's response? "Panic, mostly," admitted. "They have weapons and defensive systems significantly more advanced than anything we've seen. Initial military assessments suggest collective forces would suffer catastrophic losses in any direct engagement. Some council members are talking about negotiating terms of surrender." "That's insane. The moment you show weakness to that kind of aggression, it never stops." "I know, which is why the council wants to hear from you. Apparently, you've become the Collective's resident expert on dealing with overwhelming force. Get to Prime, Earth is counting on you." The courier ship made the journey in 5 hours and 40 minutes, pushing its engines to the limit. Spent the transit reviewing everything intelligence had gathered on the. The data was sparse but alarming. Their ships incorporated technology at least a century ahead of collective standards. Their initial communications suggested a civilization that viewed all other species as inherently inferior, worthy only of service or destruction. Most concerning was their military doctrine, which emphasized total warfare and complete subjugation. They didn't negotiate, they dictated. They didn't compromise, they conquered. Every historical record they had transmitted showed the same pattern. Arrive, demand submission, destroy those who resist, enslave those who survive. El met at the spaceport, his eyes blinking rapidly with stress. "Lieutenant, thank the stars you are here. The Council is in chaos. Half want to surrender immediately, a quarter want to attempt military resistance despite impossible odds, and the remainder have no idea what to do." "What do you think?" asked as they rushed toward the council chambers. "I think we are facing a civilization that sees the Collective as we might see primitive organisms. They have technology, experience, and ruthlessness we cannot match conventionally. But I also think if we submit, billions will suffer under rule. They do not conquer for resources or territory. They conquer because they believe it is their natural right to dominate all other life." The council chambers were indeed chaotic when arrived. Representatives from dozens of species argued loudly, fear and anger mixing into a toxic atmosphere of indecision. The council speaker struggled to maintain order as voices overlapped and tempers flared. "Order," the speaker demanded, wings beating for emphasis. "We have invited Lieutenant of Earth to provide tactical consultation. He has demonstrated unique capabilities in addressing threats beyond conventional responses. Lieutenant, what is your assessment?" Every eye turned to as he stepped onto the central platform. He took a moment to gather his thoughts, knowing his next words could determine the fate of billions. "Surrendering is not an option," he began bluntly. "Species like the respect only strength. If you submit, they will never see you as anything but slaves. They will take everything, give nothing, and gradually exterminate you through attrition and abuse. Submission is slow death." "But we cannot defeat them militarily," a representative protested. "Their technology is too advanced. Any direct confrontation will result in our annihilation." "Direct confrontation, yes," agreed. "Which is why we don't engage directly. We use asymmetric warfare, tactics designed for situations where you're outmatched technologically and numerically." "Explain these tactics," the council speaker requested. Pulled up a holographic display showing the fleet disposition. "They operate under certain assumptions based on their experience. They assume inferior civilizations will either surrender or attempt conventional warfare. They're prepared for both responses. What they're not prepared for is unconventional warfare, methods that circumvent their technological advantages." "Such as," crystalline voice among stones chimed from the delegation. "Guerrilla operations, sabotage, intelligence warfare, psychological operations, and targeted strikes against critical infrastructure," listed. "The fleet is powerful, but it requires logistics, supply lines, command and control structures. Disrupt those systems, and their technological superiority becomes meaningless." "You are describing terrorism," a representative said with horror. "I'm describing war," corrected firmly. "Asymmetric warfare between mismatched forces. It's not pretty, it's not honorable by traditional standards, but it works. Earth's history is full of examples where technologically inferior forces defeated superior enemies through unconventional tactics." Elle stepped forward. "The human speaks truth, though the council may find it uncomfortable. I have studied Earth's military history extensively. They have refined irregular warfare into an art form, developing doctrines specifically for fighting against overwhelming odds." "Give us a specific example," demanded General, who had been attending council sessions since forming his partnership with. "Vietnam War 1960s 1970s began. The United States possessed overwhelming technological superiority, advanced aircraft, artillery, armor, logistics. The North Vietnamese and possessed mostly small arms and determination. By conventional metrics, America should have won easily. Instead, the war lasted over a decade and ended with American withdrawal." "How did the inferior force succeed?" crystalline voice among stones asked, genuinely curious. "They refused to fight on America's terms," explained. "Instead of massing forces for conventional battles where America's firepower would be decisive, they used hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, booby traps, tunnel networks. They made the cost of victory so high that America eventually decided the war wasn't worth continuing. That's the principle of asymmetric warfare. You don't have to win militarily, you just have to make winning too expensive." The council was silent, processing this information. Finally, the speaker asked, "And you believe this approach could work against the—" "I believe it's our only chance," replied. "They expect quick victory through shock and awe, demonstrating their superiority until resistance collapses. If instead they face an enemy that absorbs their initial strikes and continues fighting through unconventional means, they'll face a prolonged conflict they're not prepared for." "But their technology," a representative protested. "How do we overcome such advantages?" "Technology has vulnerabilities," said. "More complex systems have more failure points. The more advanced their ships, the more they depend on specific components, specific energy sources, specific command structures. We identify those dependencies and target them. We make their advantages into liabilities." Over the next hours, outlined a strategy that seemed insane to most council members, but was grounded in solid military theory. Rather than massing fleets for conventional battles they would lose, the collective would disperse forces into small, mobile units. Rather than defending territory in traditional ways, they would implement scorched earth policies, denying the any resources they might exploit. Most controversially, proposed creating special operations teams trained in sabotage, assassination, and intelligence gathering. These teams would operate behind lines, targeting leadership, disrupting logistics, spreading fear and paranoia. It was brutal, ruthless warfare that violated many species' concepts of honorable combat. "This is not how the collective fights wars," the council speaker said, though his tone was more contemplative than critical. "Which is exactly why it might work," L interjected. "They have studied the collective. They know our military doctrines, our strategies, our limitations. They have prepared counters for conventional collective warfare, but they cannot have prepared for tactics they have never encountered." "And humans have encountered them?" asked directly. "Extensively. Every major power on Earth has developed unconventional warfare capabilities. America's Special Forces and CIA, Russia's, Britain's SAS, Israel's Mossad, and China's Special Operations Forces. We've been refining these methods for decades because we knew conventional warfare between nuclear powers would be suicide. Asymmetric warfare became our alternative." The council called for a recess to discuss the proposal privately, retreated to a waiting area where Commander Vex was monitoring the proceedings remotely. "You're asking them to become something they're not," she observed. "Most of these species have never conducted anything like special operations warfare." "Then they'll learn," replied grimly. "They won't give them a choice. Either the collective adapts or it dies. Those are the only options. And if they choose to adapt, you'll be the one teaching them." "That's what I do now, apparently. Teach the galaxy how humans fight wars." The council reconvened 2 hours later. The speaker's expression was solemn as he addressed the assembly. "After extensive deliberation, the council has decided to pursue Lieutenant proposed strategy. We recognize this represents a fundamental departure from collective military doctrine, but the threat we face requires extraordinary responses." Murmurs of agreement and protest rippled through the chamber. The speaker raised a wing for silence. "Lieutenant, the council authorizes you to organize and lead a joint special operations force comprising personnel from multiple species. You will have full tactical autonomy and access to all necessary resources. Your mission is to demonstrate that they can be successfully resisted, giving the collective time to mobilize and adapt." Felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. "I'll need time to select and train personnel." "You have 1 week," the speaker replied. "Intelligence suggests the fleet will begin its main offensive in 8 standard days. You must be ready to deploy before then." 1 week to create a special operations force from scratch, train them in techniques most had never imagined, and prepare them for combat against a technologically superior enemy. It was impossible by any reasonable standard, but had spent his career doing impossible things. "I'll need trainers," said. "Other humans with special operations backgrounds. Can Earth provide them?" Admiral appeared on the comm screen. "Already done, Lieutenant. We're dispatching a team of 12 operators from various Special Forces units. Former SEALs, Rangers, Special Forces, and a few CIA paramilitary officers. They'll arrive at Sanctuary Station in 36 hours. "Good. I'll also need volunteers from collective species willing to undergo intensive training. People with combat experience, high intelligence, and psychological resilience. At least 40 candidates. Will wash out the ones who can't handle it." The call for volunteers went out within hours. Was surprised by the response. Over 300 beings applied, representing 20 different species. Some were military personnel, others were civilians with relevant skills, a few were former criminals seeking redemption. All understood they were volunteering for something dangerous and unprecedented. The selection process was brutal, and his incoming human trainers put candidates through physical tests, psychological assessments, tactical exercises, and stress evaluations. They were looking for specific traits: ability to think under pressure, willingness to take initiative, capacity to work in small teams, and mental toughness to handle violence and fear. After 72 hours of continuous testing, they had selected 28 candidates from 15 species. It was a diverse group: heavy weapons specialists, scouts, engineers, medics, intelligence analysts, and representatives from a dozen other species. Each brought unique capabilities and perspectives. The training that followed made previous program look gentle. They had 4 days to turn diverse individuals into functional special operations teams. Sleep deprivation, stress positions, cold water immersion, tactical drills under live fire, Close quarters combat, explosive breaching, vehicle interdiction, every skill could cram into exhausted brains. Half the candidates quit in the first 2 days. The remaining 14 were pushed even harder, subjected to scenarios designed to break them psychologically and physically. Those who survived weren't just trained, they were transformed. They had learned to function when everything hurt, when terror clouded thinking, when exhaustion made simple tasks nearly impossible. "You've created monsters," Vex observed, watching the final graduation exercise where teams executed a complex hostage rescue under intense opposition. "I've created survivors," corrected. "Though we'll show no mercy, neither can we. These people understand that now. They've internalized it at a level beyond intellectual knowledge." The 14 graduates became the core of Operation Ghost Strike, the name had chosen for their unconventional warfare campaign. They were organized into 3 teams of 4, plus 2 reserve operators. Each team had a specific initial target based on intelligence gathered about fleet operations. Team 1 would infiltrate a supply depot and plant explosives timed to detonate during a critical resupply operation. Team 2 would insert onto a command ship and sabotage its communication systems during a planned fleet movement. Team 3 would assassinate an admiral who intelligence indicated was critical to coordinating the invasion. All 3 operations would launch simultaneously, hitting in multiple locations before they could respond. The goal wasn't just tactical damage, but psychological impact. They needed to learn that the collective could reach them anywhere, anytime, despite their technological advantages. Briefed his teams on the night before deployment. They gathered in a secure facility on Sanctuary Station, faces showing determination mixed with fear. They all understood the odds of survival were poor. "I won't lie to you," began. "These are suicide missions by most standards. They will be hunting you from the moment you're detected. Your chances of extraction are minimal. Some of you won't make it back." He paused, letting that sink in. "But if you succeed, you'll prove something crucial. You'll prove they can be hurt. You'll prove they're not invincible gods, just beings with advanced technology. You'll prove the collective has teeth. That knowledge will inspire resistance throughout occupied territories. It will give people hope." "And if we fail?" asked an operator who had excelled during training. "If you fail, others will try again," replied. "Unconventional warfare isn't about single operations. It's about sustained campaigns, constant pressure, forcing the enemy to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. You're the first strike, not the only strike." The teams deployed that night, each traveling to their target locations through different routes to avoid detection. Remained at Sanctuary Station as overall mission commander, monitoring intelligence feeds and ready to provide support if possible. 20 hours later, Team 1 struck. The explosion at the supply depot destroyed 3 supply vessels and killed over 200 personnel. More importantly, it contaminated the depot's fuel reserves, forcing them to reroute their logistics through less efficient channels. 18 hours after that, Team 2 successfully infiltrated the command ship Dominant Will. They planted malware in the communication systems that would activate during the next major fleet operation, disrupting coordination across the battle group. The malware was sophisticated, designed to appear like random system glitches rather than deliberate sabotage. Team 3's mission was the most dangerous. Assassinating Admiral or required, penetrating his heavily guarded quarters aboard the flagship Eternal Conquest. The team managed to reach his location, but were detected before they could complete the kill. In the firefight that followed, all 4 team members died, but they succeeded in killing the Admiral and 17 of his senior staff. The response was predictable: rage, increased security, sweeping searches of all facilities. But they also showed something had been hopping to see: confusion. The mighty Ascendancy, conquerors of a dozen systems, had been successfully attacked by species they considered primitive. Their assumption of superiority had been challenged. More importantly, word spread through collective space. The attacks were broadcast on every news channel, analyzed by every military strategist, discussed by every civilian population. They were not invincible. They could be hurt. Resistance was possible. "It's working," Elle reported to 48 hours after the operations. "We're seeing increased morale throughout collective forces. Volunteers for special operations training have increased tenfold. The fleet has slowed its advance, diverting resources to security rather than offensive operations." It's a start, agreed. But we can't stop. We need to maintain pressure, keep hitting them, never let them feel safe. Over the following weeks, more operations launched. Some succeeded spectacularly, destroying assets and killing key personnel. Others failed with heavy casualties among the collective teams. But each operation, successful or not, contributed to a growing narrative. The collective was fighting back in ways that couldn't counter effectively. Trained more teams, refined tactics based on lessons learned, coordinated increasingly complex operations. His human trainers worked around the clock, spreading special operations expertise throughout collective forces. What had started as 14 operators grew to hundreds, then thousands as more species embraced unconventional warfare methods. The meanwhile grew increasingly frustrated. Their technological superiority meant nothing when they couldn't protect their logistics, couldn't trust their communications, couldn't secure their leaders. They had expected quick conquest, but instead faced death by 1,000 cuts. 3 months into the campaign, something remarkable happened. The requested negotiations. Not surrender terms for the collective, but actual negotiations between equals. It was unprecedented in their history, a civilization built on conquest actually seeking diplomatic resolution. Attended the negotiations as military advisor, along with L and the Council's diplomatic team. The representatives were imposing beings, tall and armored naturally, evolved as apex predators on a harsh world. They radiated confidence and barely contained violence. The lead negotiator, Prelate Hose, addressed the collective delegation with obvious distaste. Your resistance is more effective than anticipated. We have reassessed our invasion timeline. You mean you've realized conquest will cost more than you expected? Interjected. Ho's eyes focused on him with predatory intensity. You are the human, the one who teaches lesser species our weaknesses. I teach them that there are no lesser species, corrected. Just beings with different capabilities. You assumed technological superiority guaranteed victory. Earth learned centuries ago that assumption is false. Your species is young, barely space-capable. You presume to lecture the ascendancy. Smiled coldly. My species is young, but we've been fighting wars since before we had written language. We've refined warfare into an art form and a science. We understand that victory isn't about who has better weapons, it's about who adapts faster and pays the higher price. The collective is now paying that price, and you're learning you can't afford yours. The negotiations continued for days. They were unaccustomed to compromise, viewing it as weakness. But they were also practical. The campaign of unconventional warfare had cost them more resources than they had anticipated, with no clear path to victory. Their technological advantages were being systematically neutralized by tactics they had never encountered. Finally, an agreement was reached. They would withdraw from collective space in exchange for trading rights and technology sharing arrangements. They would maintain diplomatic relations, but acknowledge the collective's sovereignty. It wasn't peace, exactly, more an armed truce between powers that recognized mutual capability to harm each other. When the fleet finally departed, celebrations erupted across collective worlds. They had faced extinction and survived. They had confronted an enemy far more powerful and forced them to retreat. It was unprecedented in modern galactic history. However, felt no particular triumph. Too many had died in the campaign, both collective operators and personnel. War was always tragedy, even when necessary. The victories had been purchased with blood and pain and trauma that would haunt survivors for years. A week after the withdrawal, the Collective Council held a ceremony honoring those who had fought. Attended reluctantly, uncomfortable with public recognition. The ceremony was elaborate, representatives from dozens of species praising the warriors who had saved their civilization. When his name was called, he stood before the council with mixed emotions. The speaker addressed him directly. Lieutenant of Earth, you have demonstrated courage, expertise, and leadership beyond measure. You taught the collective that survival requires adaptation, that superior technology cannot overcome superior will, that victory comes to those willing to pay its price. We offer you the collective's highest honor, the Star of Unity, awarded only to beings who have fundamentally altered galactic history. As the medal was placed around his neck, looked out at the assembled delegates. He saw species that had learned to fight in ways they never imagined, that had discovered capabilities they didn't know they possessed, that had proven themselves capable of defeating seemingly impossible odds. I didn't do this alone, said, his voice carrying through the chamber. Every operator who trained, every team that deployed, every being who chose resistance over submission, they made this victory possible. I just showed them what they were already capable of achieving. The ceremony concluded with acknowledgement of those who had died in the campaign. 37 names were read aloud, representing 15 species. Among them were members of its original training group, operators who had learned and died before they could teach others what they had learned. That evening stood at his usual spot on the observation deck, watching stars drift past. El found him there, his eyes reflecting starlight in complex patterns. "You are troubled," El observed. 37 dead, replied. Plus 214 wounded, that's the price of our victory. Compared to the billions who would have died under rule, the mathematics favor your approach. Mathematics don't hurt when you close your eyes at night, said quietly. Mathematics don't wake you up screaming. I turned civilians into killers, taught peaceful species how to murder efficiently. That's not something to celebrate. But it was necessary, El insisted. You gave the collective tools they needed to survive. Would you prefer they had remained helpless? Was silent for a long moment. No, I'd prefer a universe where those tools weren't necessary, where species could interact peacefully without the threat of violence. But that's not the universe we have. You sound like someone who has seen too much war. Every warrior sees too much war, replied. That's why we fight, to prevent others from having to. It's a sacrifice we make, taking on the violence so others can live without it. El's eyes blinked thoughtfully. This is the human paradox again. You despise war yet excel at it. You seek peace yet prepare constantly for conflict. You value life yet deal in death. It's not paradox, said. It's realism. The galaxy contains beings who will take what they want through force. Someone has to be willing and able to stop them. On Earth, we learned that lesson through a painful history. Now the collective has learned it too. And what happens now? El asked. They are gone, but your training programs continue. The collective is developing capabilities it never possessed. This will change the galactic balance of power. That's above my pay grade, admitted. I'm just an operator, not a strategist or politician. I teach people how to fight effectively. What they do with that knowledge is their decision. But even as he said it, knew it wasn't entirely true. He had fundamentally altered galactic military doctrine. Species that had relied on conventional warfare were now embracing special operations, asymmetric tactics, unconventional approaches. The galaxy was becoming more human in its strategic thinking, for better or worse. Over the following months, continued his work, training new operators, refining tactics, sharing expertise across species boundaries. His original graduates became instructors themselves, spreading the knowledge he had given them. The collective special operations forces grew from his initial 14 operators to several thousand, forming a new pillar of galactic security. Earth's government offered to recall him, suggesting he had done enough, earned his rest, but declined. The work wasn't finished. The galaxy had learned the lessons he taught, but those lessons required constant refinement, continuous adaptation. New threats would emerge, requiring new responses. Warriors like him would always be needed. He received messages from former teammates back on Earth, some congratulating him, others expressing concern that he was becoming lost in the work. A few suggested he was developing a messiah complex, believing only he could save the galaxy, worried they might be right. But then he would see graduates of his programs, operators from species that had never imagined they could be warriors, successfully executing missions that saved lives and stopped threats. He would receive reports of conflicts avoided because potential aggressors knew the collective had teeth. He would hear stories of species finding courage they didn't know they possessed. Those moments made the work worthwhile. Not the victories or the honors, but the knowledge that beings across the galaxy could now defend themselves, could stand up to bullies and tyrants, could refuse to be victims. That was what had really taught them, not specific tactics or techniques, but fundamental understanding that survival required will, adaptability, and sometimes calculated violence. A year after the crisis, stood before a new class of trainees. They represented 23 species, each volunteering for special operations training despite knowing how difficult and dangerous it would be. They looked at him with mix of fear and determination, ready to be transformed into something they weren't yet. My name is, he began, as he had begun every class before. I am a retired lieutenant from the United States Navy SEALs. Over the next 8 weeks, I will teach you things your species has never known, skills that will change you permanently. Many of you will fail, some will quit, a few will be injured, but those who complete training will become the finest warriors your worlds have ever produced. He paused, looking at each trainee. Before we start, understand this. I am not teaching you to love war. I am teaching you to end it. The best warriors are the ones who fight so others don't have to. Remember that when training becomes unbearable, you are not here to become killers. You are here to become protectors. The training began and threw himself into it with the same intensity he brought to every class. He was hard on them, demanding, accepting no excuses. But he was also fair, never asking them to do anything he wouldn't do himself, always explaining the why behind the what. 8 weeks later, 18 graduated. They had been broken and rebuilt, taught and tested, pushed to their absolute limits. They were different beings now, harder and more capable, ready to face threats most collective citizens would run from. They were warriors in the tradition represented, trained not just in tactics but in mindset, understanding that true strength came from discipline and determination. As watched them graduate, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not pride exactly, more like satisfaction. He had created something lasting, something that would outlive him. The knowledge he carried, earned through years of blood and sweat and pain, would continue spreading through the galaxy long after he was gone. No armor, no dog tags, nothing official to mark him as military. But every being in that graduation ceremony knew what was. A warrior from Earth, a teacher from humanity, a being who had shown the galaxy that peace required the capacity for violence, that survival demanded constant vigilance, that freedom had to be defended with skill and courage and sacrifice. The galaxy had recognized the Navy SEAL, not through medals or insignia, but through actions and results. They knew him by what he taught and what his students achieved. They knew him by the threats he stopped and the lives he saved. They knew him by the fundamental transformation he had brought to galactic military thinking. Had tried to retire, to leave the warrior behind. Instead, he had become more important than ever, not through personal glory but through spreading expertise. He had become a teacher, a bridge between human military tradition and galactic security needs. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it was perhaps the life he was meant to live. As the ceremony concluded and new graduates dispersed to their assignments, remained behind, alone in the training facility. He thought about the journey from that first firefight on Zedge to this moment, how one ambush had catalyzed changes that reshaped galactic power structures. He thought about the 37 operators who had died learning the lessons he taught, their sacrifice ensuring thousands of others could survive. He thought about the billions who lived in safety because someone had been willing to stand between them and darkness. And he thought about Earth, that blue marble where humans had evolved, that death world that had forged humanity into survivors and warriors. The galaxy was learning what Earth had taught humans through millions of years of evolution. That peace was precious precisely because it was fragile, that civilization survived only through constant defense, that the price of freedom was eternal vigilance paid in blood and determination. Retired Navy SEAL had brought that message to the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. Neither would he. But looking back at everything that had happened, all the training and fighting and teaching and sacrifice, found he had no regrets. He had done his job. He had protected the innocent and stopped the guilty. He had taught others to do the same. That was all any warrior could ask, all any SEAL could hope to achieve. The mission was ongoing, would always be ongoing, but had done his part. The stars shone beyond the facility's viewports, cold and distant and infinite. Somewhere out there, threats still lurked, wars still waited, darkness still gathered. But the galaxy was ready now, armed with knowledge Earth had spent acquiring. And if new threats emerged, if the galaxy needed warriors again, and thousands like him would be ready. No armor, no dog tags, no official recognition required. Just skill and determination and absolute refusal to let evil operate unopposed. That was the SEAL tradition. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. And that was legacy, written in the training of thousands, the saving of billions, and the fundamental transformation of galactic military thought. The mission never ended, but it ensured it would continue long after he was gone, carried forward by warriors from 100 worlds who understood what he had taught them. That peace required strength, survival demanded adaptation, and freedom was worth any price. In the end, that was enough. Operate unopposed. That was the SEAL tradition, the legacy carried. And it was a legacy he would pass to the next generation, human and alien alike, ensuring that the galaxy had warriors who understood both the necessity of peace and the requirement for strength. That humanity's capacity for war could be directed toward noble purposes. Once a seal, always a seal. The galaxy would learn to respect that, or it would learn to fear it. Either way, humanity's place among the stars had changed forever, and there was no going back. That was what seals did. That was what humanity could do when pushed. The galaxy was about to learn that lesson firsthand. Word would spread, and the galaxy would begin to understand that humans, these weak-looking creatures from their pleasant little water world, might be far more dangerous than anyone had realized.